I've chosen video to be this much a part of my life as anything else. So I feel you deserve an equal amount of me, which is what drives this particular video.
I'm not saying this to try to sound cool, and it really shouldn't sound cool, but I've done a lot of drugs in my life. Everything from ketamine to acid to cocaine and so much more. Really, I only bring that up because out of everything I've ever done, psilocybin mushrooms have always had the largest impact on my mind. The largest impact on my psyche, and I feel like it's because I trust them. It's with the help of psilocybin mushrooms that I was able to understand who I am, who I could be, and who I never want to be again. I remember there was one trip in particular where everything changed. It was stupid, but I was drinking all night and decided to eat a bunch of mushrooms as the sun came up. Everyone was already sleeping, and I was alone. I somehow ended up on the side of the house I was at, laying in trash and crying. More like sobbing, actually. That experience is one of the first that forced me to wake up, to see who I really am, and who I'm supposed to be. We'll talk a little more about that later, but for now, let's talk about where these powerful mushrooms came from. The psilocybin group of mushrooms, known as magic mushrooms, shrooms, or psychedelic mushrooms, naturally grow and are found in over 200 different species around the world. We know them today as a recreational drug that causes hallucinations and euphoria, but the ancient origin of magic mushrooms goes back thousands of years. Let's look at the history that mankind shares with the psychoactive drug psilocybin and its host, magic mushrooms. So, the history of magic mushrooms is a very complicated one. Very much like the history of cannabis, it's legitimately impossible to pinpoint the first use of mushrooms. That's actually a good thing. It just proves that things like psychedelic mushrooms and cannabis are natural and have been here since long before us. It's funny because doing these videos and this research, it's really given me a better understanding of history in the sense that we really don't know shit. I mean, yeah, there's tons of imagery found on prehistoric murals and rock paintings that date back to around 9000 BC. These paintings and murals are met with a bit of controversy in that some people say that we see these pictures and just see what we want. But there are so fucking many. And from so many different places on Earth. There's some that I feel like have to be hard to say that aren't meant to be exactly how they look. Look at this. One of the most important scenes is to be found in the Tin Hanza Rift rock art site in Algeria, in which we find a series of masked figures in line dressed as dancers, surrounded by long and lively decorations of geometrical designs of different kinds. Each dancer holds a mushroom-like object in the right hand, and even more surprising, two parallel lines were drawn to come out of this object and connect with the central part of the head of the dancer. This interpretation would coincide with how psychedelic mushrooms are looked at now in having a strong connection and effect on the mind. I mean, isn't it obvious? These dudes look like they're tripping balls. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of everything from rock paintings to statues depicting mushrooms all over the world and for thousands of years. There are even many who believe they were actually placed on Earth purposely. That some sort of alien entities left them here way back when as some sort of communication tool. that's a whole other video. Let's not get into that today. There are even theories depicting the most popular religion on earth, Christianity, as having ties to mushrooms in its creation. Another crazy topic for another time. The history of psilocybin mushrooms is something to be left to historians, and honestly, we will probably never have much more information than the little we have now. And that's okay. In my opinion, we have enough information. Most historic artifacts, if not all, depict the use of mushrooms in spiritual and religious rituals, which at the very least lets us know that they are important. And they have been since probably the beginning of man. Real quick, can you imagine the first human who decided to pick up these things growing from the ground and eat them? Poor guy. The idea of the recreational use of psilocybin is something men in the past would probably be disgusted and confused by. They didn't just bag up mushrooms and take them to watch trippy movies and crazy concerts. They were taking mushrooms how they should be taken, with purpose, knowing they're important and life-changing and associating them with that. So many times I've seen people eating mushrooms like candy and completely not appreciating their power. And I can't lie, I've been one of them, but usually it doesn't work out too well.
Nice.
Brian, what are you doing?
Ah, jeez, Stewie. Scared the crap out of me.
What you got there?
Okay, I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone. You have to be really cool about this.
Yeah, of course.
These are mushrooms. It's a psychedelic drug. Makes you see weird things and feel happy for a few hours. I figure we're gonna be stuck inside for a while with a storm, so it'll be a fun way to pass the time.
Okay.
Are you gonna be cool?
Oh, yeah, I'm totally cool about that. I have a lot of friends who do it, and they're willing to do it around me all the time because they know I'm so cool about it and I don't judge them. So, go ahead.
Well, here we go.
Yeah, that's what my friends say too. Well, here we go. Oh, dude, I think I can feel it too. I'm getting a context high. Shh, there. Everything's gonna be fine. You're all right.
I think I'm dying. Jane Fonda. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, buddy. Totally Jane Fonda. It's gonna be okay. Your pal Stewie is right here. Just relax.
And get some rest.
Brian! Hide!
The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round. Oh, through the town.
Wanna
Gravity.
Slip me some tongue.
Did you try the chicken, buddy?
I think you gave me worms, Brian.
Brian.
I hope it goes without saying that that's not at all what shrooms are actually like. But it was funny, and I just had to shake things up a little bit. So as little information as there is about the origins of psychedelic mushrooms in the world, there's quite a bit of information on how it came to be such a popular recreational drug. As with anything, humans are very overzealous creatures, and we tend to just fuck up anything that's good. And as I looked into this, I started seeing these guys like Timothy Leary, Albert Hoffman, and Robert Wasson in a new light. They played a huge role in the introduction of psilocybin mushrooms to the modern world, and I had no idea. Real quick, before we get into the how, I want to ask a quick question. There's no right or wrong answer. The past is already over and we can't change it. But was it a good choice to introduce the wonders and power of psilocybin mushrooms to the masses at that time in the world? Obviously, it was already a known substance, but it wasn't one of the most popular recreational drugs in the world, being used irresponsibly and disrespectfully until then. It wasn't given the bad name it has until then. And as much as it's hard for me to say any sort of information can be wrong, was it? Anyways, the man who was known to have brought psilocybin mushrooms to the modern Western world was Robert Gordon Wasson. The story goes Wasson and his wife, during their 1927 honeymoon trip to the Catskill Mountains in Russia, happened to come across some edible wild mushrooms. Fascinated by the large difference in cultural attitudes towards them in Russia compared to the United States, the couple began field research that led to expeditions to Mexico to study the religious use of mushrooms by the native population. They claim to have been the first Westerners to participate in the Mazatec mushroom ritual. Wasson's 1956 expedition was funded by the CIA's MK-Ultra Subproject 58, as was revealed by documents obtained by John Marks under the Freedom of Information Act. The documents state that Wasson had no idea he was a participant in the project. It was the shaman, Maria Sabina, who allowed Wasson to participate in the ritual, and who taught him about the uses and effects of the mushroom. Sabina let him take her picture on the condition that he kept it private. But Wasson nonetheless published the photo along with Sabina's name and the name of the community where she lived. In May 1957, they published a Life magazine article titled "Seeking the Magic Mushroom," which brought knowledge of the existence of psilocybin mushrooms to a wide audience for the first time. The article sparked immense interest in the Mazatec ritual practice among Americans, an interest that proved disastrous for the Mazatec community and for Maria Sabina in particular. As the community was besieged by Westerners wanting to experience the mushroom-induced hallucinations, Sabina attracted attention by the Mexican police, who thought that she had just sold drugs to foreigners. The unwanted attention completely altered the social dynamics of the Mazatec community and threatened to terminate the Mazatec custom. The community blamed Sabina. She was kicked out of her community and had her house burned down. Sabina later regretted having introduced Wasson to the practice. But Wasson contended that his only intention was to contribute to the sum of human knowledge. Only a year after the release of the Life article, Wasson and his wife were accompanied on a follow-up expedition by French mycologist Roger Haim. Haim cultivated the mushrooms in France and sent samples for analysis to Albert Hoffman. Hoffman, who had in 1938 created LSD, led a research group that isolated and identified the psychoactive compounds from the mushrooms. Hoffman was aided in the discovery process by his willingness to ingest mushroom extracts to help verify the presence of the active compounds. He and his colleagues later synthesized a number of compounds chemically related to the naturally occurring psilocybin to see how structural changes would affect psychoactivity. I never knew these guys like Albert Hoffman were studying psilocybin, but also picking it apart and messing with its chemical structure. Hoffman ended up creating 2 compounds with complicated names that were basically a different version of psilocybin, but only lasts half the time. That seems weird to me. I don't know why. It's not like it was a bad thing. All it did was make it easier to use in psychoactive therapy. Yes, even in the very beginning of psilocybin mushrooms coming to the modern Western world, they were being used therapeutically. Sandoz, the Swiss company Hoffman worked for, marketed and sold pure psilocybin under the name Indocybin to physicians and clinicians worldwide. There were no reports of serious complications when psilocybin was used in this way. In the early 1960s, Harvard University became a testing ground for psilocybin. Through the efforts of Timothy Leary and his associates, Leary obtained synthesized psilocybin from Hoffman through Sandoz. Some studies, such as the Concord prison experiment, suggested promising results using psilocybin in clinical psychiatry. According to a 2008 review of safety guidelines in human hallucinogenic research, Leary and Alpert's well-publicized termination from Harvard and later advocacy of hallucinogens further undermined an objective scientific approach to studying these compounds. Damn, they kind of fucked up. In response to concerns about the increase in unauthorized use of psychedelic drugs by the general public, psilocybin and other hallucinogenic drugs suffered negative press and faced increasingly restrictive laws. In the United States, laws were passed in 1966 that prohibited the production, trade, or ingestion of hallucinogenic drugs. Sandoz stopped producing LSD and psilocybin the same year. Further backlash against LSD usage swept psilocybin along with it into the Schedule I category of illicit drugs in 1970. Wow. I didn't know any of that. Sometimes I wonder if the world just wasn't ready yet. Or maybe it just wasn't handled the right way. Either way, it's nice to see some people are still trying. There's so many studies and so much science that prove psilocybin is a powerful and effective medical and therapeutic tool, it's overwhelming. In recent years, there's been a huge resurgence of interest in it, and it's really amazing to see the beginning of what hopefully will be a bright future for psilocybin in the world. Shrooms have always been amazing to me. I remember the first time I did them, my brother and a couple of friends and I just walked around our neighborhood. We laughed and we were nervous and we probably looked like a normal group of kids just having fun. Maybe. I remember that experience being the first time I felt the connection to nature you get when you eat shrooms. When I did the heroic dose a few years later, I legitimately felt connected to the past and to everything, and I realized it's all the same. That time was nothing and everything was happening at once. I was able to leave the world I was in and see the world as it was. I've taken a large dose alone in my house and sat there and just meditated for hours. I've snuck into Coachella while peeking on a shroom trip. I ate shrooms and cried on the side of a stranger's house in the trash. I've seen the good and the bad, the smart and the irresponsible. And I can do nothing but just appreciate their power. appreciate what they have and will continue to help me with. Honestly, I was struggling to find the inspiration to start this exact video. There was so much information to go over, and I tried to be as thorough as possible with research, and I just kept getting overwhelmed. So I decided to take a nap. I woke up and microdosed about 0.3 grams of psilocybin about an hour before writing the script. I mean, it helped a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching. Smoke something, drink something, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.
Is it fear that drives you? Or is it the lack of fear that drives you? Everything is everything. Yet, there's always a yet. Ha